I want to go at the koan, the question, who am I? And go back to the very beginning of Chan, kind of the origin story, and where that question is right at the heart of the practice. The question of the who am I, and the two states of mind that it evokes. I want to talk about these two states of mind. I was thinking today about the image of when I ask the question, who am I? And I don't answer it. It's as if I'm a trapeze artist and I've launched out into space and I haven't yet caught the hands yet, and I'm just suspended in space all around. And as soon as I land, I catch the hands, and then I've got something solid. But then I also have work to do. I have to keep holding on to stay someplace. So I want to talk about those two states of mind of being a kind of quality of openness of being, and then when I make the me, when I have a solid, unchanging self. So some of the features of, and also how that happens, how when all of a sudden we're going along, we hear the sound of the rain in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden, the rain's just pouring through the room and through my life and through my history and through eternity. The whole universe is rain. And then suddenly I think of the talk I have to give. And I check the clock and it's 4 a.m. and I think, oh my God, my mind will be, unreliable. And still, nothing's gone wrong, My mind might be unreliable. And if I then don't go and grab that person who gives an unreliable talk and make a me out of it, I'm the kind of person that and then I become the solid me. And there's all kinds of pain involved in that. So it's not the thing that's happening that is causing, it's not the condition itself that is the source of the me. So it could be anything at all, anything like that. Lists are a really great place for that to be evoked, the me. And in retreat, there's all of this, with all this silence and space, the me, when it's evoked, is searingly apparent. Suddenly we're in terrible pain. We feel horribly lonely and bereft and outside of things, or we feel frightened, or we feel unsafe, or we feel confused, but it's as if in super saturated form. And I think it's not because this evokes that sort of field, it's mainly that we don't have all the usual distraction that numbs it and a kind of white noise of our life, so we don't feel or see it. We just see it here. And then something like a list, like the sign-up lists. For instance, I noticed that someone hadn't signed up, someone who I was hoping would sign up for my list. And the first day they didn't sign up, then, I thought, wow, it's the first day. And then they didn't sign up the second day. I noticed, and I could feel, how you'll feel yourself wanting to grab onto something and make yourself unhappy. So I could feel this happening, and cell phones are great for this, I've noticed, and email is also a wonderful source for unhappiness. For the self, when the self gets, longing for its usual kind of unhappiness. So I noticed I didn't sign up, and I noticed the compulsion to look again, and I thought, don't do it. And I looked, and they still hadn't signed up. And I saw my mind go out and grab that and make it be about me. They don't love me. I'm outside the warmth and love of the universe. And actually, they might not love me, and that's not the important bit. It's not that they love me or don't love me. I could go and check it out with them and work it out, or I could do, loving kindness practices and calm my mind, or I could go through the rationalizations how this couldn't, I could do inquiry how this couldn't possibly be true. Or I could simply have it and see it. This is how I make myself feel unloved. This is how I do it. This is the way I do it. And simply have the way. And there's just like a tremendous bracing prajna that comes in being undefended internally and externally. Both of those happen simultaneously. I'm not going out there. I'm turning the light back, and I'm discovering something about me that I thought was something about the world. So we begin to notice how we make the me, and simply by seeing it, it undoes itself without me having to do anything about it. And again, it's not that you might not be unsafe or unloved, or you might be using the exact same words, but it's who is saying the words. Is it the me saying the words, trying to make more ground? I might actually have won a Pulitzer Prize. And I might tell you that I won a Pulitzer Prize. And if it's the me wanting to feel important, then we know what that feels like. We can feel the effect of that. And we can feel what it does to the other person. I can begin to feel, as soon as I try to make space for myself to feel important in the world, I'm announcing to the world how unimportant I feel. And I'm more importantly, I'm trying to hide from myself how unimportant I feel in the world. I think this is how I have to do it. And the beautiful thing here is at retreat is that we hold that piece for each other. So, and it brings with it a field of around itself. So we can, if I'm trying to feel important, we can, and I'm with someone who's doing that, then you can feel, they can feel a corresponding pull to hold up their side of my delusion. And at that point they'll either want to puncture your inflation, or they might want to gain some of your importance and tell you, you were the greatest writer. You and I are such good friends. We are so close. Would you like to come to dinner? And so I want to somehow mine that's me supporting your delusion, and both of those are part of the field of the delusion. But the other way we do this for each other is we can feel other people are caught, and then if at that moment we're not, we simply hold the open field of being. And then something else is possible in me and in them. Something else might happen there. But we do that internally. We don't need any other people for this, as you probably have noticed. We can go through the whole chain of events and play all the characters ourselves. We just barely, it's so great because we just barely touch into reality. Just enough to get a little bit of material. A little novelistic detail. So we also begin to notice in retreat how exhausting that is. To keep up the me. There's hardly any energy left for anything else because all of my resources are going towards building this structure. The jackhammers are going, the dump trucks are coming and going, and there's all of this energy that goes into trying to earn my place in the world, earn my safety in the world, or whatever it is we think we lack. And the thing is, what we come to see is, we'll begin to see how we do it. The thing we think we need, then we think we need to earn. So everyone will have a different thing they need. You might be someone that feels that you need, that the world is going to obliterate you and attack you. So all your resources are going towards building bunkers and getting, being sure you can protect yourself from the hostile world. Or maybe what you need is, you simply need people to love you. You need so much to feel loved in the world. And how you might do that is you try to charm people or try to be so helpful or kind, or so that I'll earn my place in the world. And the thing is, it's a little bit like a lottery machine, where you get a little bit of you win like, $10 or something, and it's enough. That person smiled at me, so then I keep doing it. But that's what perpetuates the continual exhaustion of I always have to continually earn this in the world. So those are all the qualities of the self, the me. It's very much it's the world of gain and loss, of right and wrong. It's the feeling of separation. I'm outside of things, and the only way I can get inside of life is to earn my way in life. Or life is so threatening, the only way I can be safe is to have a very, very secure border. I want to talk about the koan I want to talk about today is the foundation story of the Chan Buddhism, with the famous Bodhidharma, the wild creature that he was. He came to China, and the first person that he goes to see is the emperor. He goes to see the Emperor Wu of Liang. And you already feel that even simply the opening gesture, we already somehow feel that he's fully himself. He's not impressed by the emperor. He's not afraid of the emperor, and he doesn't need anything from him. So it's a true encounter. There's nothing to be gained, and there's nothing to be lost. He's all the way here with that encounter. And the emperor says to him, the first question is, he says, I have built vast monasteries and temples, and I've ordained monks. What merit have I earned? And Bodhidharma says, no merit. So that's that first part of the me, where we're hoping that if we do X, will be inside of things. And it's not that it's not infused in that he might actually want to build the temples. It might be, we'll go in and out of these states while we're building the temples. In a moment I'm free while I'm building it, and all of a sudden my mind has grabbed it, and I'm trying to be holy. And no merit. So he's a bit deflated by this answer, and he tries another question. He says, well, what is the first principle of the holy teaching? Thinking, maybe there's some piece of the Dharma I've missed here. And yeah, some of you have come in and said, I think you know something. Could you just tell me? So that's what, that's what the Emperor Wu is saying there, and he says, Bodhidharma says, vast emptiness, nothing holy. So there isn't any place where it's not. And then the last question that the emperor asks him, because he's starting to not have any ground under his feet at this point. And there's some uncertainty infusing and making the exchange stranger and more fluid already. You can feel it in the koan. And he says, who is it standing here before me? And Bodhidharma says, I don't know. And there he is in midair. Let go of the trapeze. So I want to talk about, over this week you've all gone through all those states of, there'll have been moments of vast emptiness and nothing holy. There'll be moments where you simply, it's not even a question anymore of knowing or not knowing who you are. You're simply here. You're simply with someone. Last night it was great. During the evening, very end of the evening before he started playing music, I heard I was facing this way and my back was turned that way. And I suddenly hear Asa's come into the room, and he's starting this marvelous drumming. And I'm thinking, wow, that is so amazing. I didn't know Asa had come back. And then I realize D jumps up, and I realize it's the radiator. So we've all had moments where we simply forget who we are, and the universe just comes forward. And then then we'll start having contact with, we'll begin to notice that there's a lot of space. And then there's these intractable, repetitive dilemmas that are kind of ancient, it's almost like it's like some sort of guerrilla war, where it never ends. It's this one problem in my life. It just comes up in different forms, but it just seems to be impervious to my meditation. I think it's getting better, and then here it is again, this fear or this sorrow or this loathing or this, this person in my life who oftentimes is a family member. If you're me, it's a family member. I have so many family members that there's lots of opportunity for this, where there'll be a perpetual feeling of difficulty, it never gets bridged. So I'm going to tell you a little story now about impervious, intractable difficulties and the solidity of our views. You know, one of the things you notice too is in your meditation that in order to maintain the me, there's not that one of the main, our resources go towards propaganda. And the propaganda budget is huge in the inner life. Vast resources are devoted to that. And in the external world, too, we'll see, you know, we try to influence others to feel a certain way, to support the me. And we'll attack others that seem to threaten the me. So all of that. And how, if we weren't doing that, all kinds of space would be available for our lives to reach us, for life to reach us. So the story I'm about to tell you, all of it is true. Just like your lives. And it happened in a time long, long ago and far, far away, in a country far south of our borders. And at that time of this story, the country was called Colombia. And it was about 12 years ago. And they had a guerrilla war there that had gone on for so many decades that most of the people who lived in this country never knew a time without war. It had always been there. So they were born into a set of circumstances where you were either born on one side of the war or the other. The conflict was already there. And our families are so much like that. And where you'll be born into a certain set of attributes of the me, you know, the border of your family's me. And there'll be different countries and, you know, different factions in there. And in this guerrilla war that had been going on for so many years, they got to the point where they were just exhausted, you know, and many of you have come in to see a teacher with that feeling of, I'm just exhausted by this struggle. And that's a really promising moment when we're so worn out, we're just sick of it. We're starting to see that this is an unwinnable war. We come to that point where we just can't win in this way. And there's a promise there, and there's a gap where we stop doing what we always did, not for any good intentions, but simply we're just too tired to do it anymore, or we're in just too much pain to do, or we're too, we've had enough. And at this time, the Ministry of Defense went to, they just didn't know what else to do, so they went to an advertising agency in Bogota, in this beautiful glass building, and they asked them to help them out with this. What can we do? And the first thing that this advertising agency did was they were used to, you know, selling soap and things like that. They didn't know much about the war. They didn't know, they said, we didn't know anything about the gorillas. We just thought they were the bad people over there and that we were the good people. That's the only thing we knew about them. And that's very much our delusions, our me, is not very interested in specificity. It doesn't like contact with reality because there might be contradictory evidence in reality. And this is really fun to notice too. Like, I noticed with one of my sisters that I don't like to know anything that might soften my heart towards her. So you'll see this kind of censoring of the psyche where we simply refuse anything that would begin to make things porous. We want to hold on to our view. We kind of like being unhappy in this way. And I think the risk in feeling closer to our situation is that we might have to change. We might have to change our solid view. So the first thing they noticed was we just don't know anything. We don't even know who the gorillas are. So I thought, well, we'll just get a bunch of gorillas and we'll just listen to them. We'll just hear what they have to say. So they, and that would be like us sitting in meditation. We simply begin to listen to and feel our lives without any discernment, not trying to make right or wrong or work it out. They weren't trying to work it out. They weren't trying to punish these people, or they were people that had left the gorillas and they just wanted to listen to them. So they interviewed hundreds and hundreds of gorillas and just listening to their stories. And one of the people who was interviewing these was this woman who her father had been a colonel in the army. And she had grown up with all kinds of violence and strangeness. And she said that she could hardly walk into the room where there was one of the gorillas, because she actually had, like this physical reaction of she just couldn't. And it's not that she couldn't bear to be with him, she couldn't bear to be with what it evoked in herself. And I think that's the kind of steadiness of the practice and with each other, that it takes a certain amount of, there's some courage and dignity in simply staying with ourselves when we're listening to our own lives. And she said she listened to all of these gorillas, and they were all, there was all these stories of, she had all this feeling of blame that they had, and actually I think her father had been killed by the gorillas. So she had all these stories of blame. It was their fault, and as she listened to their stories, she heard some of them had been kidnapped as children. They, all of the ways they had suffered, and that she said she kept grabbing on different people to blame, but that she said eventually it just kept falling and falling. She said eventually, who do we blame? The Spaniards, the dinosaurs, There's no end to that. It was infused with uncertainty, and it began to untangle itself. So contact with reality begins to infuse our solid view with uncertainty. And then the world can begin to reach us there. So they had this idea that then they take some of these stories, and the gorillas loved listening to the radio because of soccer games. They were like to listen to soccer games. And they put these commercials on the radio of how terrible the gorillas were, by former gorillas. The life you're living is so terrible. Come, demobilize. Come and demobilize. And they found out, that was really not effective. And some of you have come in to see me this is something that we do, is we notice that there's pain, and we notice that we're doing it to ourselves, and then we want to punish ourselves for doing it, you know? And that's what they were, it's not helpful, right? It's just, now you just have one more problem. It's still not solving, you're still in a war. And you're involved in the world of revenge and punishment and all of that. So I noticed that didn't work very much, and they were kind of at a loss. And then there were these two young guys who were in their 20s or something, who just joined the firm, and they noticed that around Christmas time, demobilization numbers increased. And they thought, well, that's odd. You know, there's a kind of space there. And you'll notice that too in your meditation, where there'll be a kind of, like maybe when the bell rings, you know, or suddenly the rain starts, or that'll be a kind of moment of where there's an opening of being, of simply, where things can pass through, where things become more porous and fluid, where I suddenly, things are possible that weren't in this other guarded state. They had this idea that it was called Operation Christmas. And they got the military to get their Black Hawk helicopters, and this took some doing, because the Black Hawk helicopters were busy fighting the war. They got these helicopters and they took them into the middle of the jungle where the guerrillas were, and they decorated about a dozen massive jungle trees in blue Christmas lights. And they left a little sign next to the Christmas tree that only lit up when they would walk by, so it would get triggered. And it said, if Christmas can come to the jungle, you can come home. Demobilize. At Christmas, anything is possible. And something like 5% of the guerrillas demobilized during that Christmas period, and they not many of them saw them though, but they heard about them, and they said, well, you know, we like the Christmas lights, and even the commanders, who usually are really hostile towards all of your attempts, they kind of like them too. And they said, but you know, we don't really walk around the jungle much. We actually use the rivers. So what they did for the next Christmas is they went to the villages along the rivers, and they spoke to the communities that lived there, who were, some of them were involved with the guerrillas. You know, they may be sympathetic to the guerrillas, or they might be guerrillas themselves, or they might know people who are guerrillas. So this is one of those porous moments here where the line of the self, of you and me and this and that and right and wrong, is beginning to become, have contact with. You know, there's a more fluid, porous experience there. And they asked them, could you give us messages to send to the guerrillas? So they wrote notes to them, they took off their crosses, they put little gifts, and they collected 7,000 or 8,000 of these little gifts or notes or things, crosses and things, and they put them in these spheres that were transparent on the top, and they glowed blue, and they floated them down the rivers at night, thousands of these glowing like a celestial universe floating down the river at night. And the gorillas would find them. And there was a big, and there wasn't, they didn't even say demobilize. They simply were some sort of infusion of connection between one and the other. And that's happening all the time, where you walk outside and there's little glowing, luminous balls of crystal hanging off of each of the branches. And they're all saying, demobilize. And then the next year, they did this beautiful thing. They said, well, you know, we've done all these lights. And one of the things the advertising agency said was, what was really important was beauty and surprise. And you'll notice that too, that beauty and surprise aren't for or against anything. They're simply, those are also, you know, they're before you've decided. Beauty simply appears. Before they're disarming. And so the next year they tried, they did something else. It was really quite lovely piece where they found about 30 or 40 women, mothers, whose children had either been captured by the guerrillas or had left to join the guerrillas, and the mothers had never seen them again. And they asked them for photographs of their children. And they wanted the photographs of their children before anyone could recognize them but the person themselves. So there was a direct and personal and very intimate call from the universe to the children, you know, from the mother to the child. And they took these photographs and they made posters like missing children photos that you see all around, you know, in milk cartons and things. And they went into the villages and they went into the jungles and they just pasted them like they were missing children photos of the children were missing now, you know. And the poster said, before you were a gorilla, you were my child. Come home this Christmas. I'm waiting for you. And before you were a who, you were, you know, before you were made the self, you were a child of the universe. You were innocent. And the universe is always making that call. Before you left the universe and made a war, you were simply yourself. And that poster is just pasted everywhere with your picture on it. So if we don't have to earn our way into the universe, and we simply need to notice how we're making ourselves feel outside of things, it's a much easier job. We don't have to gain any more skills, we just have to stop doing things to prevent the connection. You've been sitting for 4 or 5 days. You've built monasteries. You've made monks monastics. How much merit have you earned? No. Who is it sitting here before me?
I don't know.
That's a good place to stop.